So good morning, everyone. I do see people still entering, but we're going to get started in the interest of time. Welcome. I hope you all had a nice summer. It's so nice to see so many people signed up for today's webinar. Um, I hope you're enjoying this weather. It's supposed to be 90 today. So although this is the first webinar of our fall series, it does feel like we're still enjoying summer. So we are going to be welcoming today Jessica Maldonado from PolicyWorks, and she's going to discuss with us how credit unions can effectively use social media as part of its marketing strategy. Just to give you a little background, Jessica is the Vice President of Public Affairs from PolicyWorks, and she leads both the public affairs and public relations activities for their clients, including media relations, digital strategy, grassroots communication, and more. PolicyWorks is based in the Midwest. They were launched with the vision of creating a one-stop advocacy shop for businesses and organizations needing professional lobbying, public affairs, or grassroots assistance, including credit unions. So, Jessica, we're so happy to have you here with us again today, and we are looking forward to your presentation in just a minute. Just to go over the format, um, Jessica, invites anyone to jump in at any time. If you have any questions, you can use the raise your hand button at the bottom of the screen, or you can ask a question in the chat. If you use the raise your hand, I'll just unmute you and then you can ask your question yourself. And otherwise, we'll have at the end of her presentation some time left for a Q&A session. And again, you raise your hand, I'll unmute you, or you can just ask your question in the chat box or the Q&A box, and I will ask the question to Jessica. And with that, I am going to hand it over to you, Jessica. The floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you, Erica. And I'm so excited to be here with you all again today. As Erica mentioned, I work for a company named PolicyWorks, which a fun fact is part of a family of companies here in Iowa that's wholly owned by the Iowa Credit Union League. So we were actually born from the credit union movement. Our original kind of mission was just to really help the credit union movement here in Iowa with advocacy and public affairs. And then we've been able to branch out and work in a lot of non-credit union industries, which has been really fun. I just put a few kind of splattering of logos up here just to give you a flavor of some of the work that we're able to do in Iowa and across the country. One of the ones I think that's probably most relatable to today is we've accidentally kind of built this little book of business in the music industry. We represent about 4 or 5 different musicians or bands, as well as several music venues like the Brooklyn Opera House, just Brooklyn, Iowa, not Brooklyn, New York, but still just as exciting. But I think that's another kind of exciting thing to point out, because a lot of these groups, social media really is their only tool to reach fans or their target audience. And there's a clear ROI. I know sometimes people talk about how do you measure impact with social media? Well, when you're doing something like trying to sell tickets to a concert, like there's a clear ROI on if it's working or not. So just all of that is to really say that we've been able to hone these kind of skills and experiences and bring it back, kind of the learnings, the tips and tricks into the credit union movement. So very excited to be here today to talk to you all. So I think kind of just taking a step back, why is it even important to tell your credit union story? As a PR professional, I think that's something we really kind of harp on a lot, is that if you don't tell your story, somebody else will, or it'll just be kind of an empty vacuum. So whether it's on social media or through the media or in any capacity, there's just a really important need to make sure your credit union is telling its story. First and foremost, you're trying to attract and retain those members. We know deposits are important, liquidity is important. We know all of those things matter, and making sure to tell your story can help attract and retain those members, because they often are looking for mission-aligned organizations. So it has to be more than just great rates. It has to be about the why behind the credit union, which we'll get into more in depth in a little bit. But really, consumers are aligning that purchasing power with those feel-good purchases. So making sure you're telling your credit union story and the why behind it, instead of just only talking about rates or kind of traditional marketing tactics, is really important. And then that secondary reason that I think we all always think about too is advocacy. Credit unions are creatures of government. And so making sure that we maintain and defend a really strong cooperative structure that we can live and work in, because that all obviously benefits our members too at the end of the day. So there really is a two-prong approach to that why behind any sort of communication strategy at your credit union, both the attraction, retention, that business reason for telling your story, but also that underlying advocacy need to make sure we're telling the credit union difference far and wide. So why does social media matter in telling the credit union story or talking about your credit union? This bar graph here actually takes a look at daily media consumption over the last 10 years. And I know it's a lot to digest here quickly, but I think the most important one to look at is that bottom purplish number. That is the internet. And so if you see over the decade ending in 2020, which I know has probably increased exponentially since then too, but this was just looking at that decade, you can see how quickly the internet has risen and cut into some of those other chunks of the pie. But you'll also see the top line, media consumption is going up across the board. People are spending more time online, more time consuming things in whatever capacity they're consuming them in. So I think that's two things to highlight. The internet usage has increased, as well as just time overall spent consuming news. And one thing to point out for TV, I think especially as everyone works on marketing budgets, which we know those marketing dollars are so precious, and trying to figure out how to best target your marketing dollars, traditional sources like TV are getting trickier and trickier. You have the emergence of streaming services. So now if you're trying to do a TV ad, you're trying to decide between cable or dish or streaming, OTT, over the top TV. And then even if you do OTT, where do you target it? Hulu, YouTube, or the free ones. So you're taking, already a limited marketing budget and trying to split it into so many ways. And so then you become a little bit less effective in some of that marketing reach because the pie is just getting cut up so much. So social media, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is a really great bang for your buck because you can reach a lot of those target audiences without having to slice and dice it so much, as those traditional kind of media opportunities become a little bit harder to target. And again, as Erica mentioned, if there are any questions, please feel free to jump in. I want to make sure this is interactive and helpful, and I want to make sure you don't forget any questions by the end. So one big kind of trigger I think we all felt and saw was usage during COVID. So this just kind of was a report kind of that marked a shift in consumer behavior in time. We already saw that uptick in internet usage and social media usage, but I think we all felt what happened during the pandemic when we all got forced to go home and stay inside was we spent a lot more time online. And there's a lot of reports that really show that, how that usage grew during that time frame. On average, 82 minutes per day were spent on social media in 2020, which was a 7-minute jump from 2019. It became one of that only connection opportunities during quarantine, and one of the only ways organizations, I know we were even here in Iowa helping the Credit Union League and our credit unions message important things to their members during that time, because that was the only way to communicate with a lot of people. In 2020, I think any of us that are parents and worried about our kids' screen time, we kind of just threw that all out the window. I think that mentality shifted for a lot of people. I think we always knew that screen time was something to be cautious of, and still need to make sure we're not spending too much time on our phones or our devices. But I think 2020 shifted that mentality into a way that made it more normal. Just, it was a new normal. We're going to be spending more time online and looking at screens, and that's not going to change, which is what that fourth bullet talks about. That was a consumer trend or habit that becomes hard to reverse. So once a consumer habit is built, it's a lot harder to reverse it or to change that habit. So we had already seen an increase in that internet and social usage, but then 2020 just really escalated it. And I think there's, for good or for bad, there's really no turning back at this point. So what channels would we use? Which I just realized I need to update this now that Twitter has officially turned to X. This slide is a little outdated. I'll have to find some new imagery. But we know those marketing dollars are precious, but we also know staff time is so precious. And how can you best utilize your staff time and your resources to make sure you're putting your effort into the right social media channels? We hear that a lot. It can be really daunting to even know, where do we get started? Which platforms should we be on? How are they different? How do we use them? And so I think just trying to fine tune, your efforts to make the best use of your dollars, your staff time, and all the resources you have will help you also see a better ROI or better results on the back end as well. So here's a slide about where do your members spend their time? So why does this matter? So for some platforms, it is easier, back to limited staff time and resources. Some platforms are easier to just wash, rinse, and repeat. Back in the day when we mostly were posting on Facebook and Twitter, it was really easy to make one graphic and one caption that could kind of just be plugged in and played on both. But now you have a lot of different sort of platforms that require more unique content. You know, what you put on Facebook is probably not what you're going to be putting on TikTok, or should you even be on TikTok? That's a secondary question we'll get to in a minute. But just understanding where people are spending their time, and then where should you be focusing your efforts. Again, some require more specialized content and some don't. But this, I think it's fairly self-explanatory. It'll show this was actually a deep dive of research from 2021 by Pew Research. I actually haven't found that they've done a 2022 one yet. I think Facebook is still going to probably remain king, even in 2022 and into 2023. But some of those down below, I think you've maybe seen some shift in the order. I think TikTok has continued to grow. I think the future of Twitter, also now known as X, is a little bit more unknown as other groups are trying to offer competing platforms like Threads. But Instagram remains a very strong platform as well. So I think you'll still see YouTube and Facebook at the top, but the order and ranking of some of those other ones might still be shifting in 2022 and 2023. So I think whether we like it or not, Facebook has still been king. I think they've been talking for about a decade about the demise of Facebook, but it just hasn't quite happened. Like the data shows that it's still the top performing social media platform for most consumers, for most brands. They're all on Facebook. So nearly 7 in 10 US adults use Facebook. Again, these are 2021 numbers, so there could be some slight shifts since then, but I think these have held true over years of data collection. 70% say they visit at least once a day. I know if you're like me, of course, I do it for my job too, but I definitely visit way more than once a day, whether that's right or wrong. It's really popular among all demographic groups. Obviously, adults, it still trends a little bit older, but you're still seeing, teenagers and other folks start accounts. So it's not that everybody else has completely abandoned it, but you will see it trend a little bit older in age demographic. They feel it's kind of leveled off over the last few years, but it's remained one of the most widely used platforms. 69% of adults, which was on that screen right before, say they use it every day. And then the second last bullet, 70% of Americans aged 18 to 29 surveyed said they use Facebook, which is really important because I think there's been a misconception out there that younger people are not starting accounts, and the data does not concur with that. There still are a lot of younger folks getting on Facebook, starting accounts. They might use Snapchat or TikTok more when they're spending more of their time, but they're definitely still starting Facebook accounts, and it's still an avenue to reach them. And then that last bullet, I think, is also an important statistic that Americans of color use Facebook at a higher percentage than white Americans. So that's what Pew Research has found doing their research. So I think that's also important when trying to help reach those communities. So how do we reach members? I think everyone's probably heard content is king, and good content is always important. But if you have good content, you also have to have good distribution. It goes back to that old saying, if a tree falls in the forest but no one's around to hear it, did it even make a sound? So that's one of the scariest things. You could have staff spending a ton of time on really great content, especially if people are getting more into video content, which takes a lot of time to produce. But if you're putting it out there and not getting any engagement and nobody's seeing it, then is it really making a sound? Is it really being effective? So it's a very noisy world out there, and just trying to make sure that you're able to reach your members where they are with content that they care about. So here we're going to get into 5 quick tips and tricks that you can use to engage your members. And these are kind of a down and dirty, and again, happy to help go into more detail on any of these. So please don't be shy about speaking up. So tip number 1, this is most important. Anytime anyone comes to us with ideas about social media or even a paid social campaign, the most important thing to do is to define your target audience, both for the targeting, but then also for the message and content you're trying to send them. I hear all the time people still talking about marketing to millennials. but they don't in their head probably have an accurate picture of what a millennial actually is. Because in real life, millennials have grown up, they're working adults, they might have kids, they're already on their second home. They're not this young, fresh faced college student that a lot of people might be thinking of when they use the word millennial. So I think, if that's the person you're looking for, you might be looking to target Gen Z, those people that are just now coming of age to start their own checking account, to begin to understand how to make big purchases in life. These are the folks born after 1995. They've grown up by, completely surrounded by technology, and traditional marketing efforts like putting an ad on cable television is basically useless. They will never see it. So they completely live online. And so making sure you understand who your target audience is, and then back to that other screen about where they spend time, that will help you make sure you're targeting the right people with the right message on the right platform. Because again, you don't want it to be a tree falling in a forest that nobody hears. So to build on that, here's another graph also from the Pew Center. And this shows the age gap, particularly on different platforms about where they are spending their time. So if you're trying to blast an ad out that's a wider demographic, maybe it's a CD rate or something that could cover any sort of age. Maybe Facebook is still your best bet. This might be a little hard to read, but at the top it color codes what the age the dots are. So that kind of indicates what the age range is there. But then that right side is showing the age differential. So if you'll see the Facebook age differential is only 20 years. That means you're going to reach the most amount of people or the broadest age demographic on Facebook. Where if you go all the way up to the top, Snapchat has a very large age differential between the youngest and oldest, and only 2% of people age 65 and older use that on there. Which I'm guessing most of you probably aren't necessarily targeting the 65 and older crowd with your social content. But again, just showing you kind of age-wise where your target audience for whatever campaign you might be running are spending their time. Because if you want to try to target them based by age and have a specific message or a specific campaign running to them, you can kind of know how to fine tune those dollars and where to spend the most effort to make sure you're getting the best bang for your buck. Here's a little bit digging deeper into those results. Instagram, interestingly, about half of Hispanic and Black Americans say they use that platform, compared with smaller shares of white Americans who say the same. WhatsApp, that actually has a large Hispanic population using it. I actually, on a personal level, married into a family from the Dominican Republic, and I know they use that a lot. It became an easy way for them to call, voice call, or video message, and so it actually grew in popularity a lot with them too. So that was a high used app for them. LinkedIn, those are folks with higher levels of education, maybe higher levels of, accumulated wealth. They have bachelor's degrees. They use that more often compared with some other platforms. So if there's an ad or a need to target maybe a higher income, higher wealth level group for anything specific, LinkedIn advertising actually has made quite a bit of progress over the years and has a lot more targeting and tools and capabilities. Pinterest, just threw that in there. That's one I've actually never used for a lot of organizational PR branding, but it's something that a large amount of women are still using. So it could still be an opportunity if you're trying to run a campaign targeting women that are still spending their time there. Right. And this one I think is really important. Big picture and few words. So I think that's one thing too. It's really easy to put a lot of, oh, yep, go for it.
Yep, there was a question that came in about the effectiveness of hashtags. Do hashtags, are they actually effective? Do they really mean anything anymore?
I think they do, and it varies by platform. I would say they're more effective on platforms like Instagram and TikTok, where you're trying to latch on to a larger conversation. I have found them to be less effective on Facebook unless somebody goes and specifically searches for that hashtag or content. So I think they still really do have a place. I think it just depends on the platform for the effectiveness. I still think on Twitter they're pretty effective, because they're still showing trending topics and a lot of hashtags. So I think they still have a place, and there's absolutely no harm in adding them. So I usually err on the side of still adding them. But they're probably more effective on platforms that are more hashtag driven to drive that content into news feeds based on whatever that user is currently looking at. So
Great.
I would still do it.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. And so here, kind of tip number 3, big picture and few words. I think that it's a very noisy world out there. And as people are scrolling, especially Gen Z, there's actually research that says if it's not 8 words or less, Gen Z literally won't even read it. So it has to be something big, visually striking, with few words or less. And then hopefully the picture, the visual, whatever that statement is on there, that could hopefully draw them into the caption, which is where you can put more information or even link somewhere for more information. So we do a lot of message testing for organizations too. And again, you're testing the visual, you're testing that main statement because people react differently to images and words. And so that's what you're trying to elicit, that emotion or that response, just to draw them in long enough to read more about what it is you're trying to say. So it has to be visually attractive, easy to digest in a very small amount of time as people are scrolling through their news feeds, because otherwise it's really easy to just scroll right on past it. Number 4, this is one of my favorites because when I first started working in the credit union industry 9 years ago, there was a lot of acronyms being thrown around and people would talk about different organizations or bills or regulation, and you just see people gloss over it. And so one of the most important things is just to remember to leave all that jargon in the boardroom, because when you're talking on social media, I don't mean this in a bad way, but you almost have to dumb it down to elementary level, because the general public is not spending their time, talking about credit union compliance or legislation or anything, needed to needing to use most of those acronyms. I know sometimes there's things like CDs, people understand what that means. So sometimes they're okay and needed to be used. But for the most part, I think it's always a good review to make sure, whether it's in the image or the caption, that you're really leaving that jargon behind. I mean, again, we're trying to sell the why, and we're not trying to sell the history behind it necessarily. And so making sure to leave those things behind that people just aren't going to understand if they look at a picture really quickly, to make sure it's a public facing message that's easily digestible for any sort of audience. This one's probably my favorite. So getting back to why we sell the why and not the rates. Back to that very first slide about telling the credit union story. I think it's really important to remember, consumers are really driven by emotion. I think even more so now than they used to be back in the day. So it's not enough just to try to market great rates and low fees. We're really trying to sell the why. And so here's a quick video I just wanted to share. This was one for one of our solar customers. His name was Tim Dwight. He was the president of the Iowa Solar Association. He actually was a beloved Iowan. He played for the Iowa Hawkeyes and then went on to play 10 years in the NFL. When he was done, he came back and started the Iowa Solar Energy Association. But he would fall into that trap of talking in industry jargon. We'd take him up to the Capitol, or we'd take him on a media interview, and he'd talk about kilowatt hours and all these things that nobody understood, and you could just see their eyes gloss over. They're like, Tim, like, you've already lost people. Like, you need to talk about the why. Like, we can explain the kilowatt hours later or the math or all those things, but you need to talk about the why. So we actually did this interview with him, which pushed him a little outside of his comfort zone, but I think it just helps showcase the why a little bit more. And this one performed so well on social media for the Solar Energy Trade Association. So I will play it for you here.
Throughout my career, I've always tried to go bigger and better. So when I got out of the NFL, there was nothing left. And plus I was on my way out and retired, and the game kind of passes you on, and you want to get something that's bigger and better. Renewables is the least cost deployable energy, especially rooftop solar. Because when that house wants energy in the morning and that sun comes up, it's providing power right here, not from way out there and fighting for the energy from that plant with everybody else. I was 16th in sun irradiation. That means we should be investing in this technology, and it's creating a ton of jobs. Well, we're putting this stuff all over farms in Iowa. So we're actually bringing jobs to rural Iowa and creating a whole new labor workforce. It's about $50 million a year. I always felt that I was destined to do good things and big things, because I kept doing it. And now, revolutionizing the energy paradigm across the world, that's one of the main reasons I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm Tim Dwight, the president of the Iowa Solar Energy Trade Association, and we're making solar happen in Iowa.
Yeah, so that's Tim. But we've actually been able to do this for a lot of credit unions too, on behalf of the Iowa Credit Union League, really more for an advocacy purpose, but it ended up being a great marketing opportunity for credit unions. We did a kind of a road show and went and interviewed members around the state. We got people from rural parts of the state, a farmer who had financed his tractors, or a guy that started a feed store in this small town, or a single mom that was able to buy a home. So we have a whole collection of great videos. If you ever want to see them, you can go to growingiowa.org. But just collecting those member stories and then being able to share them on YouTube or on social media. We even did turn them into traditional TV commercials as well, some 30-second spots. So this is something that could easily be replicated for a credit union purpose too, because we know you have great stories, and the frontline staff at your credit union probably could, tell you 10 feel-good stories off the top of your head. So getting those members to be able to share those stories and how the credit union has helped them in a personal way that really tugs at those heartstrings. Those are really, really impactful stories. And they also perform really well on social media because people love to see real life people talking about their real life situation. Here's another example of selling the why. I don't do anything with cars, so this was just one that I've always loved, because I think, if you watch the Super Bowl, you see a lot of car commercials and you don't even know they're a car commercial maybe till the very end. So that kind of always struck me about the creative minds that went into that marketing. But the same holds true for social media as well, about selling that why. So if you look on the left side there, that's a really old Ford advertisement, and you see the headline is about 3 low costs. A lot of it is about keeping costs low and stuff like that. But and we know low rates, all those things are important, but it's also not, the cost isn't always the only part of the story. And so when you're thinking about selling the why, I think we could take some more tips and tricks from the auto industry. Ford on the right side, that's a more recent one. They're talking about building a truck for America, by American workers, and they elicit this feeling that if you're buying a car from them or a truck from them, you're supporting American workers, and they have this whole feel good story that they make you feel when you're watching their commercials. And next time you watch the Super Bowl or any big thing and see some of those commercials come on, hopefully that strikes the light bulb there too. But I think they do a good job of selling the why in a lot of those things, and you'll see it not just on TV but in social media too. So as you start to look for those, I think it's always interesting when commercials start out and you don't necessarily know who it's for all the time, but if they do it right, by the end, you're definitely a fan of the commercial. Here's another example. I think nobody does it better than Nike. Sometimes I even have to go look and try to figure out what it is they're trying to sell, because it's not apparent at all. They're selling feelings, and they're selling the why. This is a perfect example of a big picture and few words. They're trying to elicit emotion. So when you're going to the store and you're looking for new shoes or equipment or whatever it might be, clothing, you have that affinity toward their brand because they've made you feel good about it. And so, in this picture, who knows what they're selling? Are they selling the shoes or the outfit? They're not selling any of that. They're trying to sell why you care about Nike, and why Nike cares about athletes, and why you should buy their stuff. So there's a million examples from Nike about really good, feel good, static images plus videos that they've played on social media, and they always perform really well. So what does all this mean for credit unions? It's really easy, I think, because credit unions have good stories to tell all the time. So in addition to those member testimonials, which are always very impactful because it's real life people talking about how they've been helped and impacted by a credit union, there's a lot of things you can do as your credit union just to share, feel good things as well. So what is the why? We're selling making dreams come true. And that could be the dream of home ownership. That could be the dream of starting a business and making those small business dreams come true. That could be just selling the idea that you're a trusted financial partner. You're, as a not-for-profit cooperative, you're putting people first, putting people over profits, and living that whole people helping people philosophy. So having images that really elicit that response, I think really helps. For some credit unions during 2020, obviously things were bad, things were shut down. but people were still trying to purchase things. They still had some purchasing power. And we helped some folks run ads about how, like summer vacation doesn't have to be canceled. Here's our RV loan rates or something like that. And so you might be trying to help people understand they could get a loan for an RV, but the first thing you were trying to sell was that summer vacation can still happen. Like summer's not canceled. So if you lead with the why, then you can always add in the rates and the details, and I'm sure all the regulatory and compliance things that are necessary to you afterwards. And that's always an important part too.
Jessica, we had another question come in from one of our CEOs. He wrote, we worked with a marketing class of seniors at Salem State University. They suggested that we put educational info on financial products rather than soliciting specific products on social media. Have you seen any of this in your research?
Yes, I think educational is always good instead of soliciting or marketing specific products. I think educational stuff really matters. And we do a lot of that too for folks, talking about, because people, we also know we have research, and this is me wearing more of an advocacy hat. When you get into a fight with the banks legislatively, people don't know the difference between a credit union and a bank. So just helping to educate on what a credit union is and how they're a different financial institution than a bank is extremely helpful, because that also gets back to those consumers wanting to make purchases based on feeling good about it. And so if more people understand that credit unions are not for profit, that they are financial cooperatives, that they are member owned, that they're putting people before those profits, they're not sending profits off to shareholders. And I know people don't want to be super aggressive or anti-bank in their marketing, but that education is so important, because there is a business reason for it, because it does help attract and retain members when they feel good about the financial institution that they're doing business with. So I definitely think that educational stuff is equally as important too. Hopefully that answered that.
Thank you. Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think, and that helps. So selling the why, which could be the education. So for all those things, whatever the why might be for that person, whatever dream they might be making come to reality, or just the peace of mind, which also kind of coincides with that education, is that you have this not-for-profit financial institution that's going to be there if you have a rainy day. We talk a lot about rainy day funds. There's a saving crisis in America. And just making sure people have those good savings habits, but also know that they have this trusted financial partner that's not going to abandon them if there is a rainy day. So then paid social, a lot of this can be done organically, just great content, if done right, has the opportunity to be shared well organically, especially if you use faces and images of real people. I think that always helps get shared more because they see it or their friends see it, and there's more organic, viral shares. But paid social media advertising is also, I think, a really good opportunity. And the nice thing about social media, that's different probably from TV or radio or anything else, is that a little bit of money can go a really long way. And you can also track it a lot easier than if you're putting an ad on TV or anywhere else. And not to say that those other forms of media are not still valuable. I know a lot of credit unions still do advertise on radio or TV and otherwise. And those are still, obviously ways you can reach your members or potentially members. But paid social media is definitely an avenue that I think is worth exploring for everyone too. One example, this is another solar example, but we had a group that did a solar group buy here in Iowa, and the only money they spent was on social media, and it really wasn't even very much. They did just Facebook and Instagram ads back in the day. It was a group buy program where people could kind of like pool their purchasing power together if they all went solar in this 3-month window. But they sold almost $1 million, $750,000 worth of solar in this 3-month window. And it was literally only Facebook plus some earned media. There's a couple of press releases and stuff went out too, but it was really only Facebook that was, advertised on. There was no TV, radio, anything else. And so to see that kind of results in a 3-month period, I think that really just spoke to the value or the power really of social media advertising, because you also have that organic component too. So if you put a little bit of money behind it, there's also an opportunity for some additional organic shares too from folks. But one thing I also wanted to make sure to point out is Facebook has really cracked down on advertising. And I've heard of 2 credit unions recently that have reached out because they've had some unfortunate things happen. One tip to make sure that if anyone at your credit union is actually going to go run an ad on Facebook is you have to check the credit box. So Facebook, and this actually stemmed a lot from a lot of the political advertising snafus in the 2016 election and even before that, where they made you check the box for political or social issue advocacy, but they've really like cracked down on other special categories. And so right now they're trying to crack down on predatory lenders or predatory practices. And so they've created a special category for credit. And even if your ad has absolutely nothing to do with a credit offer, because your name likely has credit in the credit union name, it is going to require you to check that box. And so the more times you don't check it, it actually, Facebook tallies your kind of infractions. And so you get, the more times they have to reject an ad because you forgot to check that box, Facebook is keeping track of that and they don't like that. So anytime you go to run an ad on Facebook, even if it has absolutely nothing to do with credit, you just got to be safe and check the credit box for that special advertising category. It does limit some of the targeting opportunities a little bit. Not horrible. There's still a way to get around some of that, which could always talk through more in depth on that too. But there are ways to get around targeting restrictions when you check a special ad box. But just one thing to make sure, just check it and avoid any future problems. The second bullet there, we actually have a credit union in Iowa that called because they actually had their business ad account on Facebook shut down because Facebook said they were using assuming or leading language that went against their community standards. And when she read me the caption, I could see exactly why they thought it was a good caption, but I could also see why Facebook flagged it. And it is silly, but it was something that they cracked down on, and Facebook's really hard to get a hold of if you can't plead your case to an actual person. They actually had a caption. They were going through a core conversion. Again, had nothing to do with credit, had nothing to do with, trying to market anything to people. They actually just put a message out on Facebook about their core conversion. And they used the opening line that said something like, "We know you're wondering, ... whatever they were wondering about the core conversion." And Facebook flagged that as assuming or leading language, that you can't assume what people are wondering or thinking. And so it banned their advertising account. To this day, I still don't think they've been able to get back in. So we've been trying to help them troubleshoot that too. But that's another thing when you're writing captions, just to make sure you're not using any sort of leading or assuming language. Because again, if Facebook starts to tally these strikes against you, it can shut you down. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of recourse to go back and get that fixed without finally meeting or talking to a real human at Facebook. All that is to say that third bullet, you still can create custom audiences for Facebook advertising. So even if you check that credit box and it takes away some of your targeting capabilities, you can create custom audiences by uploading a list. If you have a list of names or emails, it can try to match them on Facebook. And I should mention Facebook, because Meta owns Facebook and Instagram, you can always use one ad to perform on both platforms. So it's actually easier if you're trying to upload a list and find those people, you actually have the ability to try to find them on both platforms. So you have a way to hopefully match a higher percentage of the list. So that could be a member list if you have permission to use it. I know there's compliance concerns with some of that too. But or if there's like a prospect list you got, or, a list of folks that joined a webinar or something else, if you had permission to email or use that list, you could upload it and advertise to them on social media. You could also run ads just to your current followers. So if you did have something like a core conversion or something that you needed to communicate just to members that maybe the general public didn't care about, you could target just your current followers with those ads as well. And sometimes those are even good if you start to see engagement slipping on your page. Even just spending $50 or $100 just to target them, even with some feel-good educational message, might just help re-engage them. Because once they click like or do something to interact with your page is going to show up more in their news feed. So you're also always trying to beat the Facebook algorithm. So sometimes if you see engagement slipping, even just running a quick ad just to your followers can help re-engage you and help bump you back up in their Facebook newsfeed. All right, so here, kind of getting back to that why again. Why are we doing all of this? Obviously, there's a ROI needed. You're trying to grow your business, But effective social media can also turn those members into brand advocates. So I see all the time on social media or on Facebook where somebody says, I'm breaking up with Wells Fargo, where should I go? And you see a whole bunch of people start writing comments. And luckily, it always makes me feel good because I see a lot of people, suggesting credit unions for whatever reason. And I love to hear the why behind why they're suggesting those. But I see those all the time on social media. So if you're doing it right, you're able to turn those followers or your members into brand advocates for you too. So you're not only educating them and hopefully, increasing their usage of your products and services, but you're turning them into advocates when they go and pass along your name to other people looking for a new financial institution. And then all that is to say that in turn it complements your marketing efforts. And at the end of the day, we know that you need more members, and we need to help increase those assets you have. So at the end of the day, hopefully that shows up in your business bottom line as well. That was actually the end of my official slides, but I'd be happy to help take any comments or questions or dive into any of those topics deeper.
Yeah, Jessica, we did actually have a few questions come in. The first one that came in was, is there anything to the simple 80-20 rule where 80% of posts should be fun or entertaining to your audience, and only 20% of content should be related to a financial product or service of some kind? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, and there is. And the actual numbers or ratio, I've heard 80-20, I've heard 1-3. I even had one of our music clients actually has a manager out of Nashville, and she always says for every one ask, give a few fun things too. So I think there's definitely something to that. You need to balance that stuff between a direct marketing push with something that is more feel good or fluffy or fruity, because that diversity of content keeps people interested too. If a user just sees the same type of content come through your posts, they might be more likely to tune out, especially if it feels too salesy. So I definitely think it's important to find that balance of we need to market these things. We know at the end of the day you have to market some stuff, but then how do you balance that with some more fluffy, feel good, educational stuff? And so it could be 80-20, it could be 75-25. I think it might be a little different for everyone, but I think that's why making sure to monitor that engagement, because that will really show. I mean, again, for music clients, if I've posted too much trying to sell tickets to shows and I see engagement dip, I post a really funny looking throwback photo from 20 years ago and then it gets 1,000 likes. And so you sometimes just have to figure out, like, I'm seeing engagement dip, and so I need to do something super fun that has no business purpose really, just trying to drive engagement. So I think that does really matter.
So I guess a good piggyback question to that is so when you're generating content for social media platforms, how often is enough? Is there too much? Can you be posting and sharing too much? Where's the balance for that?
Great question. And I should have gone over quantity. I think it's always quality over quantity. Having a few really good posts a week is better than trying to post every single day with content that is just mediocre. So for most of our clients, we recommend 2 to 3 times a week. Obviously, if you have the capacity and the staff time to create really creative stuff to post every day, that's always great too. But I really think it's quality over quantity. So having 2 to 3 really good posts throughout the week is better than just posting, okay stuff every day. And again, I think it's one of those things, if you monitor, you can see when engagement is dipping and you could always adjust. Sometimes too, you can monitor when your posts get the best traction. Sometimes is it mid-morning when people have, been at work and they needed a mental break to check social media, or same thing mid-afternoon. Or, we've had some clients that ironically their most engagement is like at 6 p.m. at night, which is not at all what I would have thought. So sometimes you can also see not only the quantity of posts, but what time are you getting the most engagement, and that could help you target effectively.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't even realize, like, speaking about that, is that how so many of these platforms offer that ability to monitor that. Like I know Facebook groups, for instance, you can go in and see, like you said, when people are looking at your posts the most, when they're active the most. I think sometimes, I don't know all the platforms, but I know like Facebook and Instagram specifically, you can really track what your traffic looks like at any time of day and when you have your most captive audience. So I think there's something to that. let me just see. Somebody just posted. I find doing a post very early in the morning seems to have more response. So yeah, I do find that as well. I'm on a PTO for my daughter's school, and parents are the most active, it seems, in the morning. And then really late at night. So you see that gap in the day, you don't always get a lot of people. So
I totally agree.
yeah. Another question that just came in is, they wrote, if the thought of maintaining another channel or presence feels a bit overwhelming, some larger community banks and credit unions will outsource. Is it actually possible for smaller shops to manage your own social media content, or is that something that should be outsourced all the time?
I think it's time on task and capacity would be the first thing, if you feel like you have the capacity to do it well, and then the right person, because there is maybe a graphic design component to some of it too. And so kind of just understanding your staff capacity, and then understanding depending on which platform you might be adding, if it's Instagram or TikTok. I mean, it's funny to see more people wanting to go on TikTok. It takes a totally different kind of creative strategy than just posting a graphic on Facebook or Twitter. So I think it's just understanding staff capacity and the staff skill set, based on the platform. I know I'm fully transparent. We obviously do a lot of work for people, so people do outsource stuff to us too. But we
Right.
always try to help people learn how to do that on their own too, if they have the internal staff capacity and the employees that are motivated and want to do it. Because sometimes it is a fun thing for credit union staff to be able to do, if they're able to, because we know a lot of credit union staff wear multiple hats, and so just making sure they have the time to dedicate to it. And that we didn't even get into scheduling, but there are a lot of tools too to help schedule it. So if it's one of those things that, the first week of the month, you could knock out a bunch of content and then schedule 2 to 3 posts a week for the rest of the month, then you have this consistent drumbeat, even if somebody can't pay attention to it every single day. So there are definitely ways that you could build the in-house capacity to be able to do that, and wear a couple different hats if they need to.
Yeah, I think that even kind of ties into what you spoke about the last time when you and Grace were here, about how sometimes your best ambassadors are your employees. And, they're your most effective marketing tool sometimes. And certainly, for social media, but we all do know that smaller shops, they don't always have the capacity to lend people out to, to focus just on the marketing through social media part. So, yeah. And does anyone else have any questions or anything you'd like to say while we have Jessica here? All right. Well, we are going to make sure that this presentation is available for our membership so that you can share that with your board and your staff. And we thank Jessica so much for being here. This is always a real topic of interest for our credit unions, because social media's impact continues to be such a focal point and a necessary tool for businesses, like all businesses across the board. You need to kind of be plugged in. So Jessica, we appreciate you coming here today and giving us, kind of a broader look and letting us know, what's relevant right now. As far as our schedule, we're going to have a webinar later this month on the 24th, Tuesday, October 24th at 10 a.m. It's strategies for executive retirement planning. Bay State Financial is going to be giving a session discussing how C-Suite can maximize executive benefits. So if you haven't signed up, please do. I'll be sending out more information about that. And as always, we say to share these sessions with your management and your executive staff. Sign up, attend our webinars, write in if you have any ideas or anything you're looking for that you'd like to see in our series, and I'll continue to keep you posted. Again, Jessica, thanks so much for being here. What a great presentation. We've really enjoyed working with PolicyWorks. You seem to have, all the topics that we need to be discussing. So we appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Enjoy. Thanks, Jessica. I'll be in touch.